what if death isn't just an end? What if it's something else entirely, a profound transformation?
Hmm.
For centuries, really, across so many cultures, people have whispered about these, well, impossible experiences right at the edge of life.
Yes, stories you hear again and again.
Exactly. Their whole life flashing before their eyes, or encounters with beings of pure light, journeys way beyond their own bodies.
Things that shouldn't be possible, scientifically speaking.
Right.
Or so we thought.
Right. So tonight we're doing a deep dive. We're venturing into that really enigmatic space between life and death, right to the threshold of whatever comes next.
Eternity, maybe.
Our mission here is to explore what the cutting-edge science is starting to uncover, what these incredibly consistent reports from people who've, faced death and come back,
Yeah.
what do they actually tell us?
And maybe ask that bigger question.
Yeah,
Could consciousness itself be more than just brain activity?
that's the core of it. Where does the science stand now? Because I understand there have been some pretty startling discoveries recently.
Oh, absolutely. What's truly fascinating, really, is how recent neuroscience is.
Yeah.
Well, it's radically challenging our old assumptions about the dying brain.
How so? I mean, you'd think it just stops, powers down.
That's the intuitive idea, right?
Right.
But it turns out the dying brain is, well, it's far from silent.
Not silent. Okay,
Yeah.
that's unexpected. What is happening then in those final moments?
It's actually quite astonishing. Back in 2014, researchers found something that really makes you stop and think.
Yeah.
They detected these bursts of high-frequency electrical activity in a human brain after the heart had actually stopped beating.
So the person was clinically dead, but the brain was still firing.
Exactly. And this wasn't just, a residual flicker. It was significant structured activity, bursts of it.
High-frequency bursts. What might that signify? What are the scientists thinking it could be?
Well, the speculation, and it is speculation at this stage, but an intriguing one, is that this intense activity could be the actual neurological basis for those vivid, complex near-death experiences, the NDEs.
Ah, okay. So the brain lighting up could be the experience itself.
It suggests there's a dynamic process happening, not just a simple shutdown, even after clinical death.
And this wasn't just a one-off finding, was it? Have there been other cases?
No, definitely not isolated. There was another really well-documented case, an 87-year-old patient.
What happened there?
During cardiac arrest, this patient's brain showed a full 30 seconds of active brainwaves. And the patterns, they looked remarkably like what you see during deep memory recall, or even vivid dreaming.
30 seconds during cardiac arrest. That's significant. It implies the brain is really doing something profound.
A tremendous amount, it seems. And it's not just humans either.
Oh, animal studies too.
Yes, studies on dying rats show similar patterns. They exhibit what are called gamma oscillations.
Gamma. Those are linked to consciousness, right? Higher processing.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Linked to conscious awareness, memory recall, these high-speed brainwaves. And in the rats, they continued for several seconds after clinical death.
So across species,
Yeah.
suggesting maybe a fundamental biological process?
It certainly points that way, a conserved process, perhaps.
This really flips the script on the dying brain, doesn't it? If it's not shutting down, but entering this hyperactive state,
Yeah.
what's the big implication?
That's the crux of it, really. The brain isn't just fading out. It seems to surge into this final hyperactive state.
And this could be.
This could provide a neurological basis maybe for things like the life review, where people report seeing their entire life flash before them.
Right, that intensely personal movie reel.
Exactly. It's a powerful idea, suggesting a biological correlate for a deeply subjective experience. It challenges everything.
Okay, so that's the brain's internal activity. Fascinating stuff. But let's shift to the experience itself. What do people report feeling, seeing, hearing when they come back? Are these stories consistent?
And that's where it gets even more remarkable, honestly. The
Okay.
consistency. While the science gives us clues about the how inside the brain, the subjective what is startlingly uniform.
Uniform how? Across different people, different backgrounds?
Yes, regardless of culture, belief system, age,
Yeah.
you see the same core elements appearing again and again.
Like what? What are these common threads?
Well, one of the most common is that life review we mentioned. People describe seeing their entire existence moment by moment.
It's just like a film.
But more than that, often with this incredible sense of empathy, they don't just see their actions, they feel the emotional impact those actions had on others,
Huh.
as if they're experiencing it from the other person's perspective.
Wow. Feeling the ripple effects of your own life, that's intense.
Incredibly profound, yes. And then there are the out-of-body experiences, OBEs.
Ah, yes, the floating sensation.
People describe literally floating above their own bodies, watching the doctors work on them, maybe drifting towards the ceiling, all while they're clinically unresponsive. Heart stopped, no measurable brain activity in some cases.
How is that even possible to see things when your senses are effectively offline?
That's one of the biggest puzzles. It really challenges our understanding of perception and consciousness. Then there's the tunnel.
The tunnel of light, almost iconic now.
Right. That narrowing field of vision, moving towards a brilliant, often described as intensely peaceful light at the end.
Is there a scientific theory for that one?
There is speculation. Lack of oxygen, hypoxia to the visual cortex could cause tunnel vision, or maybe neurochemical surges. Dopamine, endorphins, could create euphoria and visual phenomena. Plausible, yes.
But the experience feels so real to those who have it.
Absolutely. And then there are the encounters.
Encounters? With whom?
Often deceased loved ones, parents, spouses, friends who've passed on. Or sometimes beings described as made of pure light.
Beings of light. And what's the feeling associated with these encounters?
Almost universally. Immense peace, comfort, a feeling of being welcomed, loved unconditionally.
It's the sheer consistency that's so striking, isn't it? Across all these different people, these same extraordinary elements keep appearing.
Exactly. The life review, the OBE, the tunnel, the light, the beings, it forces you to ask what's really going on here at that threshold.
Let's make this more concrete. There's a famous case, Pam Reynolds. Her experience from 1991 is often discussed because it had verifiable aspects.
Yes, Pam Reynolds is a landmark case. Hugely compelling. She underwent a very risky brain surgery for an aneurysm.
What did that involve?
It involved something called hypothermic cardiac arrest. They stopped her heart, drained the blood from her head, and cooled her body way down.
Yeah.
Essentially, she had no brainwave activity. Flat EEG. Clinically dead by all standard measures.
No brain activity at all. Okay. And yet
Afterwards, she reported incredibly detailed perceptions from during that time. Floating above the operating table, seeing the specific instruments being used, like a peculiar surgical saw, hearing snippets of conversation between the surgeons and nurses.
things she couldn't possibly have known through normal senses, given her state.
Precisely. She described the saw. She mentioned hearing a specific song playing in the OR, things that were later confirmed by the surgical team who were understandably stunned.
Confirmed. That's the key word, isn't it? It wasn't just a dream or a hallucination she had later. She reported actual events.
That's what makes her case, and others like it, so challenging. This phenomenon of veridical perception, accurately perceiving things from a vantage point outside the physical body, while clinically dead, it defies easy explanation.
What do skeptics or even mainstream neurologists say about cases like Pam's? How do they grapple with that veridical aspect?
Well, that remains the biggest hurdle for purely neurological explanations. While things like hypoxia or chemical surges might explain some sensations, they don't readily explain how someone with no brain function can accurately report objective events happening around their body.
So it remains a deep mystery.
It does. Skeptics might question the reporting, suggest confabulation or coincidence, but these verified cases persist as anomalies that current models struggle to account for fully.
Okay, so people have these incredible, often inexplicable experiences. They come back. How does it change them? What's the lasting impact of an NDE?
The transformation is often profound and permanent. Consistently, survivors report significant life changes,
Such as?
a huge increase in compassion and altruism, a marked decrease in materialism, caring less about possessions and status, a much deeper sense of spirituality, though not always tied to traditional religion.
And their relationship with death itself.
That's perhaps the most striking change. A significantly reduced fear of death. Often it disappears entirely, replaced by a sense of curiosity or acceptance. They describe feeling more connected to others, to nature, to the universe, a sense of purpose.
It sounds like the experience fundamentally shifts their entire worldview.
It really does. It's not just a weird dream they had. It's an event that reshapes their values and how they live their lives from that point on.
So we have these consistent reports, the science showing the brain's surprising activity. How does science try to pull this all together? What are the leading explanations for these otherworldly experiences?
Well, the mainstream scientific approach tends to look for explanations within the brain itself, neurological reactions.
Like the ones we mentioned, hypoxia.
Exactly. Hypoxia, lack of oxygen can cause tunnel vision and altered states. Dopamine surges could create euphoria. There's also REM intrusion.
REM intrusion, like dreaming while awake.
Sort of. It's when elements of REM sleep, vivid imagery, paralysis, dreamlike narratives, maybe feelings of floating, intrude into a waking or semi-conscious state. This could potentially explain some of the more bizarre visions or sensations reported.
So these are plausible contributors for parts of the experience.
For parts, yes. They offer partial explanations for some phenomena, but then you move into more speculative territory.
Okay, let's go there. What are the more out there but maybe intriguing theories?
One idea that keeps recurring is the brain as receiver or filter model,
Meaning?
meaning consciousness doesn't originate in the brain. Instead, the brain acts like a radio receiver, tuning into a broader field of consciousness.
So if the receiver, the brain, shuts down,
Perhaps consciousness doesn't cease to exist. Maybe it just returns to that broader, unfiltered state. The signal is still there, even if the radio is off.
that's a radical departure from standard neuroscience.
Absolutely. And then you have theories venturing into quantum physics.
Quantum consciousness, that sounds complex.
It is. But the core idea, put simply by researchers exploring this, is that consciousness might not just be a product of brain chemistry, but something more fundamental. Maybe information encoded at the quantum level, within the very structure of the brain, or even the universe.
And death, in this view.
Might be a release of that information. Not an end, but a transition of that quantum information back into some universal field. It's highly theoretical, of course.
But it speaks to that feeling NDEs have that consciousness continues, the idea that the self might persist beyond the body. It's profound.
It is. But again, even these fascinating theories grapple with that challenge. Unexplained accuracy, vertical perception.
Pam Reynolds again, seeing the saw.
Exactly. How does a quantum field of information or an unfiltered consciousness perceive specific, mundane details in an operating room? That's the bit that remains incredibly hard to explain, even for the more exotic theories.
And neuroscientists acknowledge this gap.
Many do, yes. While they work within existing models, many admit that certain elements of NDEs, particularly vertical perception, remain medically inexplicable right now. These experiences genuinely challenge our fundamental assumptions about the relationship between the brain and consciousness.
It seems we're pushing the boundaries of what we know. And this isn't just a modern phenomenon, is it? These themes, they echo through history, through different cultures and spiritual traditions.
Oh, absolutely. When you broaden the perspective, you see these NDE motifs reflected all over the place, stretching back centuries.
In what ways?
Well, think about descriptions of spiritual journeys in various traditions. Meeting divine figures or guides, experiencing overwhelming love or cosmic unity, receiving insights about life's meaning or purpose.
You find that in religious texts, mystical writings.
Exactly. From the Egyptian Book of the Dead describing the soul's journey, to the Tibetan Book of the Dead mapping the bardo states between death and rebirth. Even Plato's myths describing souls leaving the body. There are strong parallels.
And modern accounts often have a spiritual dimension too, right? People like Betty Eadie.
Yes, authors like Betty Eadie describe profound spiritual encounters being embraced by beings of light, showing that every soul has a purpose, a mission. And like the NDEs we discussed, these experiences lead to permanent shifts in their worldview, their personality.
It's transformative on a deep spiritual level for many.
Definitely. And you have researchers like psychologist Stanislav Grof, whose work with non-ordinary states of consciousness, through things like holotropic breath work, also suggests these states can provide access to experiences related to birth, death, and transpersonal realms.
Realms that feel more real.
That's what participants often report, yes. Accessing deep archetypal dimensions that feel, in their words, more real than real. It suggests our ordinary waking consciousness might only be one slice of a much larger reality.
And looking across cultures, do the details change even if the core themes are similar?
Yes, the cultural lens definitely shapes the specifics. Someone in the West might see Jesus or angels, while someone in an Eastern culture might encounter ancestors or interpret the light as pure energy or consciousness.
But the underlying structure,
The core themes, the journey, the light, the profound peace, the encounters with benevolent beings, the sense of returning or being sent back, those are remarkably consistent, almost universal. It suggests a shared human experience at the edge of life.
So let's try to synthesize this. We've covered a lot. What are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Okay, well, from the science side, the big takeaway is the dying brain is not silent. It seems to enter a unique state, possibly hyperactive, potentially generating vivid, even transcendent experiences in its final moments.
Right, a neurological basis for at least some of what's reported.
Then, from the spiritual or experiential perspective, these moments are often seen not as brain glitches, but as genuine transitions, glimpses, perhaps, that consciousness might persist beyond physical death.
And clinically, regardless of the cause.
Clinically, the impact is undeniable. NDEs have profound, measurable effects. Survivors are consistently changed, less fear of death, more compassion, greater connection, a renewed sense of purpose. These aren't just stories. They have real-world consequences for how people live.
So we circle back to that ultimate question. Is death truly an end? Or is it a doorway, something our current tools just can't measure yet?
It remains perhaps the greatest mystery of life, death itself.
Science gives us these fascinating clues, doesn't it? The electrical storms in the brain, the altered states, the neurochemical cascades, hints and echoes.
But it struggles still to fully encompass the sheer quality of the experience. People report the overwhelming love, the clarity, the peace, the confirmed perceptions.
It feels like we're seeing glimpses of something more, from ancient traditions talking about the soul's journey, right up to modern hospitals where people return with these inexplicable accounts.
Whether it's ultimately a complex neurochemical mirage generated by the dying brain or a genuine peek behind the curtain into what lies beyond, we just don't know for sure.
But the one thing that seems certain, those who go to that edge and return, they don't come back the same. They are changed. Forever.
Deeply changed.
So what really happens after we die? Maybe the truth is waiting right there, just beyond the veil we can currently perceive, in those flickering shadows between consciousness and whatever lies beyond. Something for all of us to ponder.